everyone. Welcome to episode 43 of Without a Mic podcast. I'm Roger Baugh. We've got Spencer. We've got Brittany. And today we've got a super special guest, which we're very excited for. We've got the August Keller.
Hey! He's
Welcome,
blushing.
welcome.
You guys can't see it, but he's blushing.
I am. Thanks,
So
guys.
if you
Good
don't
to be
know
here.
who August Keller is, he writes fantastic reviews on movies, and you do TV shows as well. So
That's true.
if you want like a very condensed, very like concise review with some great breakdowns, he's a fantastic follow on Instagram. So we'll link that and we'll shout that out at the end so you guys can go follow him. But we're super excited. We love your work and we love, sort of reading your reviews and getting a little look at movies. So before we jump into the actual review of Don't Worry, Darling, which we're here for, do you mind telling us just a little bit about yourself, kind of your passion for movies and what got you started?
Sure. Well, thanks. I'm really happy to be here, and I like your guys' work too.
Thank you.
I don't know. I've always been a film buff growing up. I think I spent a lot of time in front of the TV as a kid, and I'm a big fan of Film Crit as well. I love Red Letter Media. I don't know if you guys know them, but they're really what got me into Film Crit. And I went to film school for a little bit, didn't finish, to be honest, but I enjoyed the film theory classes more than the actual making of movies. That was kind of a lot of hard work, to be honest. And yeah, it's just been a really big passion of mine, and I'm really enjoying the ride now.
August, I gotta ask you, what's your favorite movie of all time? I'm putting you on the spot.
That's tough. That's really tough. It depends. I think my go-to
It's like the
is...
worst question I could ever ask. But yeah.
No.
Or favorites.
I think Fight Club is probably... I know it's a little bit of a basic answer, but it's what I go to.
Oh,
I want to say,
yeah, okay.
Can I say something? I know, okay, so I agree with a lot of your reviews, but there was one I could not get behind. Do you want me to tell you which one it was?
Sure, yeah, I'm all ears.
Oh, let's
It
get a
was-
little explanation.
It was Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal. Okay, I loved it till the very end, and I'm trying to get these two to watch it. They haven't seen it yet, but when, you know what I'm talking about, the very end,
Yes.
the last part, yeah. I could not, I was almost pissed.
Yeah, I had to read a few articles to...
I did too, and I still was like, "What?" But yeah, I get what you're
Okay,
saying.
wait, did August give a good review, or was
God,
it a
I
bad
haven't seen the
review?
review of this one.
I think you gave it like a 9.2 or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was really positive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
high
it's
praise
high.
here. So Brittany,
Yeah,
you didn't think it was as good as August
No,
did?
I would give it because of the end. I would give it like a 7. Because of the end, I was just so. You guys had both. I've told you both for weeks now to watch it. So until you guys watch
Hey,
it,
how is Game of Thrones on your top list if the end, the last season was as bad as you guys proclaimed it to be?
hey.
I hate to
know.
throw those shots, but
I
if you're going to
know.
talk about the end,
I know. Well, this one was just, like I said, until you watch it. And by the way, if you don't watch it, I'm going to get mad because I watched Midsummer for you. So it's your turn
that's
to
true.
watch it.
That's true. Hey, that was your own accountability. However, you can't disagree that it's a beautiful film. It
was
might
a-
be
it was.
demented, but it's a beautiful film on screen.
It was
with
a
the
beautiful
cinematography.
film. Yeah.
Well, August, I did have a question for you as well. Kind of leading off of, Brittany mentioned a review of yours, but in your reviews, for anyone who's listening, you do a couple major categories. So you do writing, direction, cinematography, acting, editing, sound, score/soundtrack, production design, casting, and effects. So
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, which of those do you count as weighing the most in a review? Like, what's your top one or two that really weighs heavily on you, and what's maybe something that you're okay letting go a little bit when you're critiquing?
Well, I think most people really prioritize writing. I think that's what the common viewer really notices the most. And in my reviews, I usually try to break it into 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph, I'm thinking more emotional, so that's writing and acting, which I think are pretty important. And then the second paragraph is more all the technicals. So I would say writing, is pretty key, and it's also the hardest to get down. So, which I think is pretty
For sure.
actually a good lead into this movie we're talking about, because I think
Yes.
that's the category that stands out.
Well, should I introduce this film? Should we get right into it?
Let's go.
Yeah, let's jump into it. Spencer, give us a breakdown.
Okay, so I'm just going to read a quick synopsis for those who are intrigued by the film but don't necessarily know the premise. So in the 1950s, Alice and Jack live in an ideal community of Victory. That's what it's called. An experimental company town that houses the men who work on a top-secret project. While the husbands tail away, the wives get to enjoy the beauty, luxury, and debauchery of seemingly perfect paradise. However, when cracks in her idyllic life begin to appear, exposing flashes of something sinister lurking below the surface, Alice can't help but question exactly what she's doing in Victory. So the stars Florence Pugh, Harry Styles, Chris Pine, Olivia Wilde, also directed by Olivia Wilde. It's her second feature film directorial project that she has going on. It's rated R. I didn't see, I think it's 2 hours and 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Like 3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. So before we go into all the nitty gritty, what did you guys think? What's kind of the first takeaway?
Can I start? I just want to say real quick, I think Harry Styles did amazing, okay? I know that there's someone in here that's not going to agree with me, but I think Harry did so good. Like, when I was watching it, aside from it being, it's huge heartthrob rock star Harry Styles, I was like, if people watch that and don't know who he is, they're going to think he's a legitimate actor. Like, he did what he was supposed to do. He did a great job. I thought it was so great. Florence obviously is amazing. The only thing I want to say about Florence, though, is that, and I know this is just a tiny thing I picked up on, is that her accent, it drops. I hear it. I hear her real British accent. I hear it a lot. So I was like, people were giving crap to Harry, even though they didn't know that he was British, But I was like, wow, Florence, her accent drops a lot. Like, I really could hear it a lot. So that's the only thing that, came out to me.
Does it not feel like Harry changed his British accent? Because it feels like it did. And I felt like that was my one qualm with Harry, because I agree. I actually think he did a pretty good job for the role that he was in. But I felt like he was kind of struggling a little bit with the accent here and there.
I don't know. I loved when the American Harry, the real Harry, it was good. Like, I don't know. I really liked it. I enjoyed it.
This will be a spoiler-filled review, by the way.
Yeah,
so,
let's say
that.
that.
We're not going to hold back anything. So, yes, real, Jack, real Harry is American, I believe. I mean, maybe that's something I needed to look a little bit more into. But you do see that contrast between both of them. Okay, that's a solid take. What do you think, August?
As far as styles go, I kind of agree. I think he showed some good range. He got mad at least once, and I bought that. His dancing, is good, and I think his character. Yeah, I mean that was it's not something everyone can do, and his character is really underwritten. I think almost every character besides Florence's, I forget her character's name. I think almost everyone's underwritten. Alice is underwritten.
I agree with that.
And he didn't do a whole lot with it. Like, if Joaquin Phoenix was in that role, he probably would have done more with it. But he did okay. I don't really get I think he's an easy target to dogpile on. But I didn't really have strong feelings about Styles. And overall, I did like the movie. I didn't love it, but I thought it was good, and I wasn't mad at it.
I agreed with your score. You gave it a 7.7, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, something like that.
I agree. I seriously, overall, the movie was really, really good. I liked it altogether. I walked out and I was like, I thought I was going to be disappointed, and I was not. I liked it.
I'm ready to hear Roger's initial thoughts on Don't Worry, Darling.
Yeah, get ready, everyone.
So I'm in the minority in this group. I don't think it was a great movie at all. I think it was...
How could you? No, I'm just kidding. Even with Adam Scott playing an extra in the background?
Yeah.
Hey, one of the many plot holes in this movie. But, so it was funny because Brittany and I both saw this. I think it was Thursday night. You saw it as well. And we both started talking a little bit. She's like, I really loved it. And I was like, wow, this is like on par with Multiverse of Madness for one of the worst movies I've seen this year. And we were
Yeah, that's
surprised, and
way
Spencer
too
was at a
far.
film festival, and we're like, oh, he'll go see it this weekend. Let's hear what he thinks. So I thought he would side a little bit more with me. Like, I don't think he would hate it, but I think he would have a lot of problems with it. And then Brittany was like, oh, he's gonna love it. And turns out he really liked it. So I sent him a GIF last night of Jon Snow, against the whole
Battle of the
army, and I was like, this is gonna be me today. I'm Jon Snow in the Battle of the Bastards. But no, I just think like. Okay, so I have a couple thoughts on this, but let me first say that the ratings online as well, IMDb, it's got a 6.3 out of 10, Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 38%, and Metacritic, it has a 47%. So overall, a lot of people...
Rotten is 38?
38%. So
That's
overall,
low.
I think that's actually 38% is pretty fair, in my opinion. But
I
I
want to
just
hear
think,
him out.
But yeah, so let me first explain my thoughts. So I kind of had 5 takeaways from this. First, you can't have a psychological thriller without the psychology part. Like, for me, there was just so many loopholes. It kind of felt like the show Lost, where they just brought things up for the sake of bringing them up and then just never explained or explored them. And so, for me, like, it had a great premise, and let me just say, Florence and Chris Pine were the best part of the movie. Visually, it was stunning. They did a great job. But, like, the writing was poor. I agree with August. I think the characters are all underwritten. And I think Florence was actually in there too much. I think they focused too much on her at the detriment of the other characters. And I think the movie peaked at the scene where Chris Pine comes in the kitchen and he's kind of like, hey, I'm excited that you're challenging me. Like, this is great. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I like this. And then they go into that dinner table scene and for the first time, she kind of asserts herself. And she's like, she starts going one-on-one with him across the table, and I loved that. I was like, this is picking up, because I was honestly bored up to that point. And then that, like, it completely devolved from there. Like, it never peaked past that scene. And I thought that it was going to be like a one-on-one, tete-a-tete, like, kind of development with those two characters through the rest of the movie. And she just evolved again back into, I'm going crazy, I'm freaking out, like. And it was just super disappointing because I feel like it kind of started a slow trajectory, peaked at that part, and then just went straight down afterwards. And I really wish that it had been better, because I think that they were onto something there. And Chris Pine was not in there enough. And then I feel like the ending was just so all over the place. One thing that stood out to me was Olivia Wilde's arrogance and her like need for attention. She wrote herself into every major scene unnecessarily, in my opinion. Like when Florence is at the end with Harry Styles in the scene where he's holding on to her and she hits him with the glass, all of a sudden Olivia Wilde's there and she's like, I knew the whole time, like, you gotta go.
Yeah.
It's like, that was so forced. And then the bathroom scene where it just felt like Olivia Wilde couldn't help it in real life and in the movie from letting other people be great. She had to draw attention to herself.
I agree. One of my notes on here says, like, Olivia Wilde's character in it rubbed me the wrong way, and I think that's how she is in real life. Now,
I agree.
I know there's a bunch of drama around the Don't Worry Darling film, but I don't know. As soon as I saw Olivia Wilde, like, her, just like, I was like, that's her. Like, that's how she is. I guarantee it. I don't know. It was just so different.
Roger, this is probably one of the very, very few times that I completely disagree with almost everything you're saying. Like, first of all, Olivia Wilde's character is kind of brilliant because she's the only female that took initiative to be in this program compared to the other males. And so
Do we know that, though?
But that's...
Yes.
That is the point of the movie, in my opinion, is to question. I stood after that movie and questioned it for an hour and a half with my girlfriend, and we talked about it. And in my opinion, whether it was intentional or not, I think that's the purpose of a film, is to make you kind of drop your own conclusions and give you enough of a direction to understand, okay, we know what the premise is, we know about Harry's character, we know about Florence's character, and kind of the severity between those two. But then it comes to, like, of course, the production design, the costume, it was incredible. The cinematography was great. I just felt like everything was chilling. The score was chilling. It played a character in the entire film where you really felt the severity of emotion because of the, like, really unique... I mean, I kind of relate it to Dune, how Dune uses these sounds more than music to really enhance, like, each transition or each scene. And so, I don't know, there were a lot of details. I think my biggest positive for this movie is that it enhanced the details. You know, Florence, in every uncomfortable moment, she was feeling suffocated, whether it was in her house whether it was when Harry was squeezing her tight. So any moment that she felt like she was finally starting to understand something, she would become suffocated. And then Harry dancing, he's dancing like a puppet because of the world that he's in, because of this simulation almost. So I felt like there was a lot of drawback to the overarching story, and I followed it perfect. And I told Ken's, because we were like 80% in, and Roger, you made a good point where you're like, hey, like, is something going to happen, right? So we were following it. I was very in tune with it, but I looked over to her and I said, hey, since we're this far in the movie and we don't have a reveal, if the reveal isn't good enough, then it's really going to make or break the movie. However, in my opinion, I thought it was a good reveal. Like, I thought the whole kind of picture of Jack and, you know, the real life and talking about the Victory Project and him searching it and you seeing that they broke up or they divorced because his hair got longer, so you know that the time period is a little bit different, and he's being asked if he had a previous relationship with this individual who he wanted to be with. So I think there's a lot of dots that connect if you're like really trying to hone in. I do think there's a lot of questions to ask, but I almost think that was intentional because it gets you talking after the movie. I feel a little uneasy about the media and because of the whole off-screen stuff that's going on with Olivia Wilde and Shia and Florence Pugh, because I think that really has masked kind of this cool psychological Truman Show meets Ready Player One aspect that was kind of going on. So I enjoyed it. I actually think it's one of the best films of the year. I wouldn't put it maybe top 3, but maybe top 5 or top 7. Because I just thought it was very unique and it tied some original plot points together.
Well, go ahead, Brittany.
Stop.
I want to say
Take your shot.
The two plot holes that I did have an issue with, okay, because I do think that there were some holes that needed connecting or that needed more explanation. My biggest one is when at the very end, Gemma, I don't even think we ever heard her character's name, Chris Pine's wife, in it. When she stabs him at the end, okay,
horrible decision.
And I know that she says, it's my turn now. So, you know, she wants to turn it like running victory is how I took it. I just don't understand how that turn happened so fast. The last time we saw her, she was defending him at the dinner table and defending him like, you know, hard. So it was almost like that turn, it felt like it was just in there to be in there at that point. I felt like we didn't get a lead up.
It totally
was. It was probably my biggest, you know. And then my second one is when Florence woke up the first time, or Alice woke up the first time, and Olivia says, Jack got you back in. Do you remember when did you guys hear that?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You guys know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I completely know what you're talking about.
I wish we would have some sort of like, at the end, I wish we would have had like some sort of flashback to how Jack got her back in. Was it a forced thing? Was it like he drugged her and put her back in the simulation? Like, we have no idea.
Well, this is one of my...
That was the one part that I was like, after, I wish that it would have done like a flashback. And I know we're not going to have answers to everything, but like those two things, I just wish we would have had a little bit more, because I think it would have rounded it out.
Well, this is one of my biggest problems with the movie, is that I don't feel like they trusted the audience. Like, the movie was like, it was very pretty visually, and like if you take it on that surface level, it was great. Like, honestly, when I went to the theater and watched it, there were so many people in there that were just there for Harry Styles. Every time he spoke, it was like this gasp and giggle throughout the audience. Like, I feel like this movie is for people who like pretty things, and like the more you think about it and the more you look at like August said, the writing and like the way that the characters are developed, it's really just empty. Like, I feel like it's cotton candy, where it's like, it's pretty and it looks nice, but if you add water, it's just a pile of sugar. Like, and so like these plot holes for me were just too much to get over. Like, why did you have her stab him at the end? Like, it felt like it was in there for no reason, like just to get a reaction. Like, all of a sudden everybody knows. And the fact that they couldn't show you Harry getting her out, like, Harry's character getting Alice back the first time she escaped. It reminded me of, have you guys seen the show Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch?
I have
Like,
not.
I didn't like that show, and the reason why is because they couldn't show you, like, at the end of a mystery show or a thriller or a psychological movie, I feel like, for me, the ending was kind of predictable in this movie, but that was just me. But I feel like if they're going to create a mystery, you have to at least feel like you could have solved it, even if you couldn't. Like at the end to feel satisfied. But this felt like what Sherlock did, which is where there's things we can't show you because our writing isn't strong enough to make you think about it at the end unless we hold something back. And so they couldn't show Harry getting her back in because that would spoil the ending. And so I feel like that's just an example of poor writing, which is like, we've got this story, but it's so thin that we can't show you certain things so that we can reveal it at the end. But then it's going to have all these questions going backwards and forwards. And so I think that was just a great example of how poor the writing was, where, you know, there's so many plot holes. Like, you know, what was all the booming going on, you know, when everything shakes? Like, never explained that. Like in Ready Player One, the simulation, you go in as an avatar. So it's like, okay, I understand that. Like, if you die, you wake up in real life, right, in the game. But, like, all of a sudden, like, at the end, you can die in this, but it's like, are you projecting your whole body in there because your body's back at home? Like, Florence's character, Alice, like, did he just kidnap her from a hospital and nobody ever asked where she was? Like, you know, why did Chris Pine's character, like, watch them and then, like, kind of take a step back, and then, like, these men that are, like, hanging out together, like, they're obviously all in on it, but all of a sudden at the end everybody's in on it. Like, there's just so many questions. And I feel like in a movie like this, where it actually kind of reminded me of like a watered down, weak version of what Inception did. And the thing that I loved about Inception is there's not really a lot of questions about how it worked, but they give you one really strong, powerful question at the end. And this one, I didn't feel like there were any strong, powerful questions at the end to like unify the concept. Because Inception, it's like they spin the top, and it's at the end you're like, okay, I understand the movie, but this top like makes you think at the end, kind of like The Prestige, where you get this great story, and at the end it's like you see the tanks and you're like, okay, wait a second, and it gives you that like lasting thought. And in this one, it didn't really have a unifying lasting thought. It was just like, okay, there's this plot hole and that plot hole, and how did this happen, and why did this work, and why did they add this, and you know what was it was just all over the place that I couldn't.
You're telling me you're not curious that, you know, whether she woke up in real life or in Victory, you weren't curious if that was their underlying, like, resolution?
Well, the writing just didn't get me there. I never even thought about that. There were so many details
that were, like, connected that I almost just feel like maybe and I'm not going to project any assumptions, but it almost seems like you wanted something and you got something else, and so it's, like, not matching with this expectation. Whereas if you watch for what it is, like, people started going crazy because Chris Pine's character said chaos is the problem of progression. So when the chaos happens, when Margaret starts telling everybody, what are we doing here? What's going on? Florence starts connecting with that. So once Florence comes out with blood all over herself and she starts freaking out, people start connecting that and saying, whoa, what's going on? Because it's chaos. Because you're connecting the dots with the storyline that's at hand. And so I don't know. I think there's some really intriguing points. August, I want to know your thoughts. Good, bad, ugly. What were the high points, low points? What did you love and hate about this film?
Well, I think you guys are all making a lot of good points, and I don't disagree with. I think Roger, I agree with what you're saying for the most part. I think the film's biggest issue, for me anyways, was just that it's almost all build up. It's really like savoring that mystery, and I think almost like too long, where it's just like, okay, I get it. She's figuring it out, and that's pretty much the whole movie, is her just slowly figuring it out. It kind of gets a little repetitive. And when the reveal does come, because there's so much buildup, because there's so much anticipation, it's almost impossible for it to live up to that, to not disappoint, you know? And I was a little disappointed, not because it wasn't a good idea. I think it was a fine idea, and it did have, like, social commentary, which I always appreciate. But it just, I mean, I'm just expecting something mind-blowing, something completely original at this point, because it's just holding on to that ace. And, yeah, I think that also, because they waited so long to reveal, they didn't have enough time to explore the themes, you know? Like, I am noticing things about gaslighting, things about objectification of women, but for someone who isn't really paying attention, it might be hard to like notice that stuff leading up to it. And then, like, I was thinking of Truman Show, and
yeah,
I mean, it's very similar. The ending is pretty similar to Truman Show, but I think what Truman Show has that Don't Worry, Darling doesn't is that conversation at the end between Truman and I forget the creator, the director of the show.
Oh yeah.
And that gets really philosophical and really kind of just lays everything out. Like, this is what this movie's about. It maybe is a little obvious or slow, but it makes its point. And I feel like Don't Worry, Darling doesn't really have that. There's that conversation with her and Styles about it's my life, talking about free will and autonomy. But it's a little too brief, I think. And then things like with Gemma Chan's character, kind of, like Brittany said, it does feel kind of out of nowhere. And it all just feels very rushed at the end. Like, it's such a slow build-up and then a really rushed ending. And it just kind of feels a bit unsatisfying. So I can't deny that that's, like, a flaw in the movie. I do think it has a lot of potential. I think it's trying to say a lot of interesting things. And for me, the technicals are so strong that I'm willing to forgive the shortcomings of the writing. But if someone came up to me and said that they don't like the movie because the writing are all those things that I just went over, then, I can't blame them, and I get why they wouldn't like it.
Can I ask you guys, do you think that Gemma's, the very end, when she stabs Chris Pine and she says, it's my turn now, and I asked Roger this, do you think that was in there for a sequel opportunity? Or do you think
I think
no?
they left it completely open-ended for any opportunity. I mean, if there was any flaw, in my opinion, like, not any, but if there's a major flaw, because there are some plot points that need to be filled, but I think people can get frustrated with the questions that they want to have answers to, but I almost think that could be turned as a positive. So that scene, for example, was she the original, idea? Was Chris Pine's real-life character inspired because he wanted to be with this person and he couldn't be with her? And so now he is, and she figured out early, and he threatened her, saying that he would kill her in the simulation, which would kill her in real life. Or I don't know. There's a lot of possibility there, and I think they left it open-ended, and they didn't want to hold your hand so that you could say, what could this be? Could this be A, B, or C? Or could it be all three mixed together? And so I think they did leave it open-ended. It seemed almost blatant that they did it on purpose. If they didn't do it on purpose, then yeah, I think that's where it causes a lot of issues, like, hey, what happened here? But to me, I left the movie questioning it in a very sincere way, like, oh my God, like, let's talk about, Gemma's character, because this was wild, where does she stand? How did she involve herself? So that's kind of my take on it. I think they did it blatantly on purpose.
But for the sequel opportunity, basically.
Yeah.
Not on purpose, but that was for a sequel opportunity.
I think they wanted to leave it open-ended, just in case they wanted to continue the storyline. I think they wanted to leave a lot of, hey, how did we get here out of it, and where are we going out of it? And they really wanted to just enhance the present, almost like A Quiet Place. You don't really know how they got there until A Quiet Place 2, and then you're on day 1, and then you're like, oh, okay, now I understand how you got there, because they just made a sequel. Whereas in the first film, you're drawing up your own conclusions as to what happened to the city and how they kind of came to be the way it is. What do you think, Roger?
I think this was one of the instances where I agree with August. I think this whole movie was just build up, and then the ending was like, here's a twist, but it's not as amazing as you thought. So here's a bunch of flashy things and crazy moments to try to help you feel like the ending was bigger than it actually was. And in this case, I feel like this was the opposite. There was almost no build up, and they just did this, I feel like, to enhance the ending, because I feel like they needed more crazy things to happen. Because I think Gemma Chan's character was in I want to maybe guess 5 scenes, and she talks in maybe 3 of them. So for that character to be the one that kills him, and he really wasn't even in there that much. So it's it was almost, again, going back to I don't feel like they gave us enough to appreciate it, because they feel like if they give you too much, it'll spoil the ending. And so he's there, he's trying to figure, mastermind capturing her, and then he just turns around and she's like, yeah, it's my turn now. And then they never even showed that again. It just felt so forced and weak writing again. It's just leave Chris Pine alive and focus on Florence Pugh. But now you're drawing attention to yet another thing that doesn't make sense. And so for me, I just think there was absolutely no build up to that. And I wish that they had, again, written it better and given the characters more ability to make sense in the things that happened, which I feel like for the most part they didn't.
I do think that the overarching idea of character development was like a flaw. I think they really enhanced Florence, and I think obviously she's the main female lead of the story, but I do think that because all these other characters are involved in a similar capacity, it would have been nice to see a little bit more, to get a little bit more out of like maybe their like backstory, get a little bit more about like them understanding what's going on. So I do think that was drawn up, by maybe a lack of focal points. Like they're like, no, we need Florence. We don't want anybody else. We need to like focus on her character development and nobody else's.
Well, and
I don't think we saw too much of her, if I'm being honest. I thought it was a great amount of her being the lead.
Oh, I love seeing her.
Harry was like the second lead. Yeah, but I will say, and I could be wrong, I haven't seen, was she in Little Women or Pretty Women?
Yep, Little Women.
Little Women.
I haven't seen it, so what I want from Florence now moving forward, I want her to try different roles that aren't as, like, she did the same facial expressions in this movie as she did in Midsummer. Like, I need to see more.
You have something against Florence, don't you?
No, I don't. It's just people are putting her so
she's
high.
So,
and I
she's
agree.
So good.
She's so good. But you can't be blind by her accent still drops when she's, playing an American. You can't be blind that she does the same thing. I feel like she's playing the same role. So I just need to see more. I'm ready for her to, maybe try a very sad movie where she's not like
this
Black
was
Widow not a change for you.
I do love her and Black Widow, but yeah, I don't know.
You're coming in hot with these weird.
I'm not.
Hey, I'm here for it. I respect it. I respect it.
I know. I thought I was like, going in to see like Florence just be incredible as she was in this movie, but I just felt like it's not different for her. It wasn't a step up acting wise at all. I felt like she's already there. Let's push her further.
Well, one thing that bored me was like how, because again, it was mostly build up. Like basically there was a point where they just had to keep you waiting to get to the ending. And I feel like, again, like that dinner table scene was probably the point where they should have done the reveal shortly after and then build upon that. Because that was like kind of the crescendo of the movie, in my opinion. And so I feel like with Florence, it was like, at first she's normal and you kind of see Margaret and it's like there's that, that foreshadowing that this is kind of what you're going to devolve into, but they're all kind of shunning Margaret and think she's crazy. And then, as time goes on, she starts experiencing these things and, she's like wondering if she's crazy and like feels like, she's seeing things and everyone's kind of gaslighting her. I think that was apparent, but then at a certain point it was like, okay, she's just going to keep seeing more things and keep feeling like she's going crazy, and then she's going to see more things and feel like she's going crazy, and over and over and over again. And I feel like that hurt her, the way her character was written. It hurt her ability to like fully develop that character, because it was just like, okay, keep this going, keep this going, keep this going. Ending, now you can like reach your potential kind of. But again, going back to that dinner scene with Chris Pine, I saw her at her best in that scene, and that was where he kind of like says, challenge me basically. And she says, okay, I'm stepping up to that challenge. And then they start going one-on-one. And I was like, okay, this is like different from what I've seen before, which is where she's just kind of paranoid and feels like, claustrophobic and gaslighted. And then after that, because they just went back to her going back into what she had been doing before that, I feel like it was just so samey that I was just kind of bored waiting for the hammer to drop. I was like, okay, I hope there's some kind of payoff here, because it just feels like they're focusing only on her, and then it's just her doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was actually, after that dinner table scene, I was really excited to see some like cat and mouse between her and Pine, and some like clever, like to bring it back to Truman Show, he's doing a lot of little tricks like hiding, setting up like a fake him in the bed, and they think it's him, and he's off somewhere else. She didn't really like pull any tricks, She just kind of starts. They just kind of start arguing across the table, and then she runs away. Right? That's about it. There's no real like cleverness to either of their tactics, and that would have been good to develop her, and that would have been good to develop Pine, who I also thought was really like he really brought it. I thought Pine really elevated the material, because his character was pretty underwritten again, and he's just kind of a mysterious bad guy We don't know his motivations. We don't know. We don't show. They don't really see him do anything interesting besides just kind of talk. And yeah, I think that was a missed opportunity.
I do
He
love
was
that the
really
dinner
good.
My
scene
character was missed.
where she's giving everything, and he's like, no, let's hear it. I loved after she explained everything. He said, I'm really disappointed. I expected more from you because she didn't get it right. And that's something I loved is she told this elaborate story, but she didn't get it right. She thought they were actually living in this town, that he was controlling everything, that he was distributing food and everything, and it was coming from him. And I think he wanted her to understand what was actually happening. And because she didn't get it, he's like, I expected more. I'm disappointed. And I really love, that's what I saw throughout the entire film with these tiny little ties throughout the story of trying to, once again, draw your own conclusions. We talk about directors or writers trusting an audience to kind of interpret themselves. I think that happened throughout the entire film. Even hey, how did Florence's character get in this situation? Well, you see Jack, Harry Styles, with his long hair and flowers at her door, and that could be interpreted as, oh, this is him going into the simulation, or this could be him literally going to, I don't know,
Drug her,
have a very unfortunate, circumstance. And so I thought that there was a lot of, hey, we're going to trust you to interpret, and we're going to give you a lot of the foundation so that your curiosity just builds. And I think that if you look at it for where are my answers, then that's where it feels weak, because I don't think they meant to give all the answers. Obviously, I mean, we don't know about many of the characters. We don't even know about Chris Pine's character and his motive. I think that was done on purpose, but I think if you do see it that way, then it's understandable why anybody would be frustrated, because they're like, yo, I want answers to everything, but I just don't think it was designed that way.
I think when again, going back to Inception, I loved how the end of Inception or The Prestige, they gave me enough to walk away from it and think about a bigger picture idea, whereas with this, there wasn't enough to come away thinking about anything other than scratching my head and asking questions about the subject matter so that I could come away with something bigger. And I think, again, I think there were a lot of things that they did really well, and the premise was really interesting, and I think the idea could have been done really well. I think, for me, what I would have liked to see is, let's get to the dinner scene, I'll forgive everything up to that point, and then from there, let's, again, like August said, let's get a little cat and mouse where we start developing Florence versus Chris's character. And that builds to where she figures it out, and she tries to either get out or shut down the simulation, but do something bigger than just I barely escaped. And I think that's what it was missing, was sort of the development of the idea, because then the reveal that it's a simulation supports sort of the tension that's building instead of just being the cheese at the end of the maze, right? And so I think that was really the biggest detour that they took that just hurt everything, was that it was, again, it just kind of came back to me at the end. I was like, okay, I have so many questions that I can't even really understand what the whole message they're trying to get you to think about at the end was, because I have to try to do so much work on my own to figure out what they were even trying to say in the first place.
It's a little bit weird to me that you keep comparing it to Inception and Prestige. And not comparing it, but that's where your mind's going. Because those films to me are up there, right?
Oh, yeah,
those
they're
are
fantastic.
those are incredible films. I haven't seen Prestige yet, but but I'm comparing this to Nope. That's how I was taking it. So have you seen Nope, August?
Yes.
So Roger, you haven't yet though, right?
I haven't yet, no.
Yeah, so just us three. Okay. Do you guys think in your head, are you comparing it to Nope? Or was it the same? Did you like it better than Nope? What did you think?
I didn't really make that connection, so I'm kind of curious to hear your elaboration.
I don't. I guess it just was Spencer. You nodded when I said Nope, right? You get what I'm saying.
When I think about this movie, I think of aspects that piece to other things. And honestly, Nope was kind of an aspect where we want to take something that we don't understand, right? So we don't understand simulation. Not quite. I feel like we're getting there. And so this movie draws that, whereas in Nope, we don't understand alien life forms. And so they create this very human-oriented experience on what would it be if we came across one? And I think that's what Olivia Wilde's trying to do, is she's saying, hey, if we were in a simulation, this is how I would picture it. Whereas Inception has a very clear story, right? It's a dream within a dream, and we understand dreams as human beings, so it's easy to relate that. but we don't understand simulation. That's why I think Ready Player One was so intriguing as well, is because it's a whole simulation, and we have no idea if that would be what it would actually, look like or feel like, but it was cool to kind of put yourself in this immersive role. And also, like, aspects of Severance, for example, like, that when Adam
Severance,
Scott, like, discovers that something might be happening to his other self. Watch, by the way, spoiler alert for Severance if you haven't seen it, but once he starts understanding, then things start rolling, right? The plot up to that point in Severance was really, it was slow paced, it was really important, but up to that point, it was exactly what's happening here. And so Florence starts understanding, but she's scared to take that full step, like, oh my, if I do something, like, will I get killed? Will I get shot? Because she has no idea what's even happening around her. And so she starts figuring these things out.
Or will she get captured and it'll restart? When she got captured, and then like she might feel like she can't get out at all.
I felt like they depicted that when after the dinner scene, when she wakes up, they showcase that they use that like shock thing to like really weaken her everything to put her back in that state. But then she obviously was starting to understand everything again. So now they got to keep doing that over and over until they kill her, or what? Like, I think there's a lot of cool analogies to different aspects of film. But yeah, I would be intrigued to hear your Nope relationship. Like, what kind of caught you? I don't think
it's not. It's just not like a relationship. It's just when you guys are, or when Roger's like saying Inception or like Truman Show, right? I just think I hold those movies to like a different tier almost. Like, this is still Olivia Wilde's second directorial debut. Like, I'm not there yet. I wouldn't compare it to anything like that. Like, those are like masterpieces to me. I would compare it to something as like Nope, where I was like, okay, I really liked it. This is Jordan Peele's third film, and then at the end, I had some issues. Or like with this film, out of his three, I had issues. Like that. I'm like, this is still. It's just not up there for me.
Well, let me say this with those movies, I do hold those movies. Severance is my favorite show of all time, by the way, August, and The Prestige is me and Spencer's favorite movie of all time. So, here's how I see it. When you do an Inception type, because this was a psychological, there were a lot of things in common with Ready Player One, Truman Show, Inception, Severance, Prestige. Like, those are the things that I kind of saw that they were trying to jump into that realm. And you can be ambitious and go for it, but I'm not going to give you credit for trying. Like, you have to deliver on the things that make those movies great, and they didn't in this movie. And I
don't think Olivia Wilde would have the opportunity to make it a movie like that.
But that's her problem then, because if you're going to try to make a movie that's this ambitious and then just not deliver on it, then I'm not going to give you credit. You still have to deliver.
What was the major focal point that didn't deliver? Because I felt like it delivered, but I am intrigued to know, like, what really just was like, what, it didn't work for me. Like, I want to know that part for you.
So, going back to all those movies, I think the one thing that I can come back to and say, like, the foundational work that wasn't done was that there were no rules in this world. Like, because when I thought about it, I was like, okay, in Inception, like, you have the dream within the dream, like, you go into another world. In Ready Player One, you go into another world. Like in Severance, you, in a way, go into another world. And when you're in that world, there's rules and things that happen, right? In Inception, you have to kick yourself out, right? Whether it's with music or the fall, like, there's these things that they do which make sense. And same thing in Severance. It's like, okay, we've got this switch that flips. When you're an innie and when you're an outie, you, like, have these different worlds that you're in, and there's this box. And with Don't Worry, Darling, like, there was no box. Like, it was just like, we're adding things, like, some things, like, again, like, I can list a couple plot holes, but, like, they're in the simulation and you hear this, like, like, and everything shakes. It's like they never explain that. So what is that? Is that, like, is that something that happens while you're in the simulation? Like, and then, they see
the airplane. The airplane.
Yeah.
The airplane was one of the things I was like, am I missing, though? Like, am I missing a metaphor for the airplane? They never went back to it. I was like, I don't know.
And then they're like, she's like, Margaret lost her child in the desert. But the children aren't real. So it's like, and then, they just never went back to that. It's like, so there's these rules. It's like, if you go in the desert, like, you just walk away and, like, get to the end and get out. Like, but it was just like, there were so many things, like, she's sitting there in the bed and she's seeing these images on the ceiling while she's in the simulation. But it's like, okay, like, how does the simulation work? Like, because I know in Ready Player One, if you die, you, like, wake up in your suit, right? Because you're running an avatar. And in Severance, like, you have an innie and an outie, and in Inception, you know that if you die in the simulation, you die in real life. So there's like, I get these rules, but then at the end, they're kind of like, oh, by the way, like, Jack's dead because he died in the simulation. But it's like, there was no context for that to make any sense until that happened. And it was so fast with a lot of other things that it just felt so rushed and like, okay, like, now I'm supposed to take that information and now the stakes are higher. It's like, these things that they could have built rules around to give things context, they just never were there. And then at the end, they just threw a couple of them in and were like, here, catch these. Now everything's intense. And so I feel like, again, with the Truman Show, like, like, at the end, like, that conversation, kind of that fulfillment of the whole thing and the whole idea, like, that there were rules and there was a box that they were trying to keep them in. And with a simulation, it is a box, like, whether psychologically, mentally, physically, like, you're putting someone in something that has limits. And for this, they didn't outline the limits well enough for me to appreciate it.
But that's your, like, to be, kind of candid, like, that's your interpretation of a simulation, right? Whereas this is Olivia Wilde's interpretation of a simulation.
Sure.
So I think that's where it gets difficult, because it did have parameters, right? Like, you hear the instructions to Jack, where it's like, hey, you got to be here this time. You got to do this at this time. Are you willing to agree with that? And he's like, yes. And so we know that the desert, the parameters are, he leaves at a certain time and he comes back at a certain time when he enters the simulation. Chaos is the one defining factor. If there's chaos, it doesn't work. The simulation starts getting fuzzy. I relate Get Out, with the hypnotizing in the chair where she sinks. That's the process that Florence goes through when she's in the bed, because it's a very psychological thing where she's kind of like sinking into this world and she starts visualizing these things. Her eyes start to kind of turn. So I felt like they walked us through quite a bit on like how this world came to be. And then obviously if you're like bumped while she's like in the simulation, if she's like bumped or the bed moves, that kind of makes sense that the world would shake or that like something would happen. It's technology, right? Whereas if it was a real town like the Truman Show where it was in a dome, then that's where you'd be questioning like, is something happening outside? What's kind of making this world shake? I don't get the plane thing. I think that's one thing I think we can all agree. I have no idea where that stemmed from. If that's like a past memory that like everybody sees when they go into it, I don't know. I have no idea. But
the girl was holding a plane. I mean, I think there must be something with the plane. I almost was like what is it? The freaking, you guys, the picture. What the hell? Why am I? The poster.
Picture?
Okay,
Oh,
the poster.
okay.
Oh my gosh, the poster. The plane is like a huge part of it, right? Because it's like it shows everything. Like I feel like the plane is huge for. Maybe they're trying to like. I don't know. I just thought the plane was very disconnected.
Maybe it's some symbolism, like
I know that's what
the spiders and enemy.
Just what could I mean? I get yeah, but like what is it? I don't know.
Yeah, and it definitely didn't feel like it was explained. And I think that's what I'm hearing from Roger is like setup and payoff is really kind of, there's a lot of misalignment there. And it's hard to disagree.
I guess I just really I liked the movie. I don't know. Roger keeps saying these things, but when you're saying them, I feel like I have almost a rebuttal for them. Like, well, did you think of it this way, or did you look at it this way? Like, I don't, except for when we do agree on the points of, Gemma, the car chase, like that kind of stuff. I totally agree with you. I think that it was all just put in there kind of at the end to have more action at the end. But I do think, like, the shaking, I think Spencer's right. You can say maybe it was outside. I loved when Spencer said that Harry was the dancing puppet, because the whole time Chris Pine is saying, dance, dance. Like, he's saying that. And I was like, at first I was like, yeah, that's like, I really thought, I was like, that's like dance monkey dance is what he was saying to him. Like, you have to do what I say. I didn't necessarily think it was like a puppet, but now that you say that, now that we have the ending, that makes total sense. So yeah, I do think there are answers. I just think if you're already so bummed out by it, or like, it didn't live up, you're going to be like, oh, well, those answers still, it just, whatever.
Well, look as the story progresses where she starts understanding that it's not real. Like, she's like, the eggs aren't cracking anymore because she's in a simulation. It's not real. So if she starts understanding it's not real, then things start tying in where there's no more yolk in the egg anymore. And she's like, why isn't there yolk in the egg? And then she starts feeling suffocated again because she's finally starting to understand that something is happening. And I like that they tie that. I looked up the plane thing, by the way, and the only thing that I saw is that red symbolized warning in this film, but there's still not really context as to why the plane was like what it was. But like the red plane, the red, like obviously cinematography when she puts her hands on like the glass, it kind of indicates like warning or like separation. But I still don't know what that indicated.
It's still not like satisfying, you know? To be
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the plane's just another thing in a long line of like I said, you know, just to bring it up again really quick, like the shaking, like if that's her shaking in real life, why does everyone else feel it? Because they all felt it, right? It was like a regular thing throughout the day, like, you know,
Software
so that
update
doesn't-
with the simulation, like it could be. I'm just saying, like.
No, I'm saying we don't know.
Draw your own conclusions, though. That is, like, in my opinion, I'm not trying to defend this film like it's perfect, because it definitely is flawed in so many ways. But I do think there's a lot of curiosity in what Olivia is trying to do, and honestly, she impressed me more than I thought she would as a director. The editing, the cutscenes, the transitions, obviously the cinematography. I just felt like it was broader than we can comprehend, which I like, because I like trying to chase a story rather than being handheld the whole time and just having instant gratification. Because that to me is boring. Like, it doesn't create questions afterwards. Where, like, honestly, I think this podcast would be much more dull if we're talking about Thor: Love and Thunder compared to Don't Worry, Darling, because there's so many questions we have and so many curiosities. Whereas Thor: Love and Thunder is just super, you know, instant gratification with comedy that's kind of lull. So I don't know.
Do you think at all that the drama before this affected people's perceptions going in? Because I think it affected mine, if I'm being honest with you. I already was like a little iffy about Olivia Wilde. I don't know. I was excited to see the second movie she's directed, but then the way that her character was in there, it was just kind of a weird taste in my mouth because I know what's been going on outside of it.
What do you think, August?
Yeah, I think that definitely affected the reception.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost seemed blatantly apparent because, like, once everything started happening off screen, people were like,
But
oh,
not in
well,
a good way.
I heard the premiere was terrible and this and this and this. And it's like, okay, but was it terrible because Florence walked out during her reception where she was getting applauded, or was it terrible because the movie actually sucked? Like, I think that there was no fine line there. People were just like, Olivia and Florence, oh, Harry spit on Chris Pine. You know, it's just like all this kind of nonsense that really had nothing to do with the movie. And Florence made an Instagram post.
That's why I think it was a negative. That's why I think it was a negative. It wasn't a PR thing for people to go see this movie. I can tell you that right now.
It was not a PR thing.
Yeah, this is like, people are going to have a bad taste in their mouth. But yeah, I want to hear you talk about Florence's Instagram, because I saw that too, and I liked it.
Yeah, so she, and I think rightfully so, she understands that she's been the heart of, like, negative emotion because of how Olivia Wilde kind of disrespected her, and she's kind of taken a step off the pedal. She hasn't endorsed the film at all. And finally, she made an Instagram post to endorse the film. And I love that she really went into context on the really hard days, the hard shoots, like the cinematography. She talked about how intense it really was. And so I'm not going to lie, I went in, I tried to be neutral. I will say I was going in a little bit underwhelmed because I was like, oh, I heard critics, you know, weren't liking it. So I think I did have a little bit of, like, underwhelming expectations, which might have helped. But I think seeing her Instagram post was awesome because she brought context to the actual film rather than, oh, no, Olivia and I are good, or, you know, Harry and I are great off screen. Like, she didn't touch on that. She touched on the film, and I really liked that.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, Spencer, that you were, like, the whole Emma Chan stabbing Chris Pine, like, might be leading up to a sequel. There won't be a sequel for this movie, I'm pretty sure. Like, I think we can safely say with
you don't
how
think?
turbulent... No.
Okay, you're right.
There won't be a sequel.
They are giving it a 38 on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever.
Well, I think
just
you're
mean
saying the
because of
relationship with Florence and Olivia
cast.
Wilde. Yeah.
And Chris Pine and Harry Styles,
You're right.
like,
That
just
will never happen.
that turbulent situation was, like, so toxic from my outside perspective that I don't think there will be a sequel for this movie, even if Olivia wanted there to be. So, I mean, again, I think that hurts it even more, just because, you know, if she was writing this with a sequel in mind, like, you should have delivered on the original product, because there won't be a sequel. But
I
wanted
don't
to
know
ask
if she was. It's just that one part that I was like, I felt like that was just thrown in there for like a Hail Mary of, if people want more, I can give them more because of this part.
Well, it just feels so Quiet Place to me, because, like, A Quiet Place can't explain everything all in one movie, but they left it open-ended to make a sequel, even though they had no plans to make a sequel. There was literally no plans on the table at all. And then they're like, well, we have a story to tell. We can literally go into a sequel because we didn't talk about how we got here. We didn't talk about where we're going. We just talked about this middle sequence. And I think that that's Don't Worry, Darling, where if they wanted to, they could do just a Chris Pine sequel and make it a prequel where it's like, how did this happen? How did he come up with this idea? There's no Harry Styles. There's no Florence Pugh.
Him and Gemma.
There's a lot of
do it.
opportunity there. So I don't know. I think the frustrations are understandable, and I can empathize with those where it comes to like character development was a little bit underappreciated with this, you know, kind of the supporting characters or the supporting actors. And then there's a lot of questions. However, I think a lot of those can be kind of swayed one or the other where it's like, oh, well, maybe it's a good thing. Well, also maybe it's a bad thing. So I think it's almost kind of it's like a 50-50 movie. I feel like you're either going to go in and feel like, oh, I really got this. I felt like I understood what they were trying to tell me. Or you're going to go in and be like, honestly, I didn't feel what I think they wanted me to feel. And I think you're kind of going to fall in one of those two categories.
So let me ask
Overwhelmed or
this.
very underwhelmed?
So let me ask this to kind of like level set. So what would you guys individually rate this movie at this point? Because I think it sounds like I'm on the left and you two are on the right, and August is kind of in the middle. So I'd just like to hear like what are your overall ratings for this?
Starting with you, Roger. I want to hear yours.
So
He's going to bring our without a mic score down. He's going to bring our average down.
So I actually think the reviews that it's getting by critics online like are accurate. So like I think the Rotten Tomatoes 38%. I think that's accurate. I think it's not a good film. I think there's too many plot holes and too many like crazy ideas. It's all build up. The delivery is just underwhelming. They threw a bunch of things at you that didn't make sense. You know, again, it looked great. Chris Pine and Florence did a great job acting. Like the music, like I guess all the like sensory things were great, but all the like mental things and psychological things were completely lacking in my point, and it just kind of felt like a mess to me. So the way I kind of do rankings is I say either this was great, go see it. You know, this was okay. You know, see it at some point. Take it or leave it, or don't go see it. I think there's an audience that would really like this movie, specifically because if you like seeing, you know, Harry Styles on screen, or, you know, if you like kind of this vibe of the 50s and stuff like that, I'd say, you know, take it or leave it. But for most people, I would say don't go see this movie. I don't think it's very good.
Okay,
I wouldn't
let's
pay
just
for it
say
in theaters.
you had to do a 1 to 10. Had to.
Like
because-
3 or 4, probably a
Good
3.5.
God. Oh my God!
Give him put a
I think
3.5
it's
down on
bad.
paper for Roger.
I am, and I'm like, oh, Spencer
August, I
better
wanna
do
hear
a
yours,
12
'cause I
out of
know
10
you
if we're
did-
gonna get this.
I know you did an kind of an Instagram like you did a chart essentially of ratings, but kind of give us your over-rounded thought.
Okay, well, I think all three of you have said things that I agree with. I think Brittany said that comparing it to Inception and Truman Show is kind of unfair because those are masterpieces. And I do think, you know, just because this isn't a masterpiece doesn't mean it isn't good. I think, Spencer, I'm hearing you say that the plot holes are forgivable. And I agree that, like, if a movie has something else to latch onto, you can forgive plot holes. Because I think Inception actually has a fair share of plot holes, but it just nails the emotions right. And Roger, you know, all the writing shortcomings, I agree. You know, I think the biggest lacking issue for me is that the core relationship between Harry Styles and Florence is just a little underwritten. I wish I had gotten to know their relationship a little bit more, and I think I would have cared a lot more. And as is, the movie really just kind of hangs its hat on the mystery and the intrigue, and just kind of, that's really all I'm really getting. I think it touches on a lot of interesting themes that I appreciate, and I'm willing to give it credit for that. I think it's all kind of relevant themes, even, you know, it's kind of social commentary, which we can all kind of walk away with and be a little bit better for. And also, I know we didn't talk a lot about the technicals, but I really did like the sound, the music, the cinematography, the editing. I think all of those are great. The production design, you know, it all looks really cool and like sterile at the same time. So for me, I would give it like a 7, which I guess would be around see it if you're into that sort of thing, or if it's just on. I wouldn't make a major effort, especially if it isn't something you're into. But if it sounds interesting to you, I would say, yeah, give it a shot, and you might like it.
Cool. Love it, man.
I love that. I'm gonna give it a 7 as well.
Cool.
I think that's a great number.
I think one thing that I want to touch on, because I love that you brought up Harry's and Florence's relationship as their characters, because I do think that there's a lot of almost like a little bit more curiosity there. Like, how was it really? Could I have maybe painted a more well-rounded picture? I do like that with the tiny flashes throughout the film, they paint this picture like, oh, they're actually really affectionate. Like, that something's happening outside of what they're experiencing. But Olivia painted it as like, oh, they're this affectionate in real life. And then you discover that they're not. Like, that Harry's actually very much like kind of a dick, and he's like very like stubborn, and he's very much like, why didn't why are you home so late? Like, I'm hungry, and he's like very kind of just like standoffish. And I like that they kind of did that, because you're expecting them to be affectionate when the reveal happens. And then when the reveal happens, you're like, oh my God, they're actually like not crazy about each other anymore, like they used
they're
to be.
headed for breakup, divorce.
Yeah, and so I
not...
like that contrast quite a bit. I do think if you're going to point out any like major pro, it's definitely like the specs. I mean, it is such a beautiful film. The aesthetic is very nostalgic. The cinematography was really appealing to me. I loved like the production design and all the like old school cars and houses and furniture and everything that they painted to make this feel the way it did. And the score was something that was unsettling. Like, it really enhanced kind of this narrative that they were going for. I do think that there are flaws, though. Like, you guys talked about, the character development. There are some writing gaps, some plot holes, throughout the film. Once again, I do think that those are forgivable because of the experience that happens and how you kind of are walked through it. So I think my overall take would be an 8.3 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I thought it was unique. I wouldn't say it was completely original, but I think it had some really original aspects to it and pulled together from beloved films such as The Truman Show, Ready Player One, Severance, even Inception and these other kind of mind-bending films. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. What do we have? What's our well-rounded score?
Okay, well, don't laugh at me. I'm trying to figure out, how do I get an average?
So do 3.5. Well, if you're doing ours compared to August.
That's what I thought I did.
If you're doing
I
ours
want the without a mic one, and then August has his.
So
what's ours?
3.5 plus 7 plus 8.3 divided by 3.
Okay, that's what I did, and then divide by 3. Okay,
yeah,
good. That's what I did.
What is it?
How smart I am.
What's our rating?
Okay, that's not right. Maybe I didn't do it right.
Oh, it's right.
No, that wasn't right. Okay, hey, Adam, is that what you're saying?
So,
wait,
I got you.
8.3 plus
I'm like
7
trying to do it.
plus 3.
And then divide by 3, right?
Yep, it is 5.2.
6.2? Oh, I got 6.2. Okay.
So it's
I think
5.2.
6.2 sounds better.
And then we'll add in... Sorry, what was yours again, August?
7.
He gave it a 7.
So you got to round up.
Plus.
Come on, 6.3.
Yeah, 6.2222.
Which, honestly, like, I'm not terribly upset with that. I think that if you're thinking of mass audiences, I almost think
Our
that's a
overall
little
is
bit more...
6.5. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I almost think
August.
that's a little bit more respectable than, honestly, like,
I agree.
like a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm genuinely, like, I'm not even, like, upset about that. I'm just confused. I'm like, how did they get that out of the experience I had? I understand the frustrations and the plot holes, but to really be an unenjoyable film, like 38%, if you look at other films in that rating, you're going to be like, wow, this is much better than those films. But once again, Rotten Tomatoes is a little bit iffy in my opinion. So
we got a 6.2 out of 10, everybody. That is our average. So take it or leave it.
Yo, August, any other, maybe points of emphasis that, regarding the way you see films or the way you watch films or anything that you want to add to the table, anything that you want our viewers to go listen to or look up or watch?
Oh.
And tell us your Instagram handle, please, so we can get it all out there.
Yeah.
It's August Keller Writes, right?
Yes, sir. August Keller Writes. And, I'm a big fan of Studio Binder. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that YouTube channel, but they really break down the technical aspects of movies. They give really concrete examples, and that's how I stay sharp and keep an eye out for those little techniques. And, I do think those technical aspects are pretty underrated. People don't really notice sound as much as maybe, it actually affects us more than I think people realize. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, keep an eye out for that stuff because it really makes a difference.
I agree with that. I love that. That's a great point of emphasis. Focus on the other things that aren't blatantly shown to you in acting or, maybe the story as a whole, but like focus on, hey, how does this look? How does this sound? How does this feel because of what world they're painting for us? Is the CGI, believable or is it a little bit much? AKA Lord of the Rings. So there's Rings of Power, I should say, not Lord of the Rings, because that's a beautiful distinction. Rings of Power. So
The bad one.
yeah. No, honestly, man, it was incredible having you on. I appreciate your insight. I appreciate you dealing with us and our chemistry because we kind of like to banter with each other.
We're a little combative over here.
Yeah, but it's fun. It creates a cool conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah. We absolutely would love to have you back. So
Cool.
let me just ask real quick, is there anything that you're looking forward to, like as a film critic? We're moving into the Oscar season, and that's something we've been discussing on the show a lot. But do you have any like kind of favorites or anything that you're excited for that might be in Oscar contention?
Let me take a look. I have a schedule here. I mean, Babylon, I think that's a pretty obvious choice. Mm-hmm. That looks interesting. And what's that Spielberg one coming out?
The Fabelmans.
The Fabelmans.
Yep.
Got a lot of hype. I'm interested to see Blonde. I know that one's got a lot of polarizing response. So I'm kind of curious to see where I land with that one.
Super intrigued by that one.
Is that going to theaters? I thought it was not.
I don't think
it's
it
on
is.
Netflix, right?
It releases this week, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Straight to Netflix, I believe. So
Okay.
I know there's a few like Glass Onion and Knives Out Story that are both going to theaters and coming to Netflix, but I believe that one's straight to Netflix.
Yeah, and
Probably
usually
because of its rating.
Yeah, big films like DC, Marvel, they tend to go to like 3,000 plus theaters. Netflix typically goes to 1,000 plus theaters and then kind of splits that hybrid with their own platform. So I think that's where maybe you get a response you want, maybe you don't as Netflix, but at the same time, it would be cool to just have that experience if you want to, and if you want to stay at home and have the convenience, then it's there as well.
For sure. Well, we appreciate you joining us again, August. We would love to have you back. Again, it's August Keller Writes on Instagram. If you want a great breakdown of film with a great synopsis that's very condensed and sweet, then highly recommend his content. We check it out. We love it. So thank you guys for joining us. If you saw Don't Worry Darling, let us know whether you're on, the we loved it side, whether you hated it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I think this was a great conversation at the end of the day, right? Like, I feel like it's always better when we disagree or there's some disagreement because it lets us explore some of those aspects of the film. And I agree with Spencer. Like, Thor: Love and Thunder, we were like, yeah, it wasn't very
All
good.
of us hated it.
And it's honestly hard to talk about. Yeah, it was hard to talk about because it's like, this isn't enjoyable,
We
got to make up something. So we will, again, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Without a Mic, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And thank you.
Hey, bye.
Bye.
Bye.